Welcome into this week's The Women's Basketball Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things WNBA, women's college hoops, oh so much more. Boy, oh boy, are we going to touch them all today. Mia O'Brien, SB Nation's Mitchell Northam, a new aesthetic for a new season. We are going to break down the college basketball 2025-2026 upcoming calendar year. We're going conference by conference. Rest assured, we're going to hit the breaking news in the WNBA right off the top. First things first, for those of you listening to this on demand, whether that's on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Additionally, if you're watching, it may look a little brighter, perhaps, on video. We are filming this during the daytime. Normally we film this at night, but we are filming during the daytime. But Mitch, I don't think you know what time of day it is, what day of the week it is, given that you have a 1.5-month-old. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. A little tired. We never sleep here, right? We sleep in April. Is that what they could say?
Sleep
in May. We sleep in May. That's right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's a great Ithaca College bomber, John Rothstein. That's our one lone.
I'm a little rusty on my Rothstein. So yeah, it's late October. The season starts in literally less than a week. I have lots of preview content to finish, and we sleep in May.
And you have already been hitting up some college basketball games. We're going to hit those right off the top as well. First things first, no her of the week. Although if you are watching on YouTube, shout out to Kevin, my fiance, for the her of the week shirt. Because we had to fit it in somehow, and we did. So shout out to Kevin. Shout out to Kevin. Let's hit this week's starting five. Mitch, I told you I didn't care whatever direction we went with this week's episode, with our conference preview show, but we needed to lead with your victory lap. Not that you care about being first, but we are very proud of you at OG Triangle Media and the Women's Basketball Podcast for breaking the news that José Fernandez will be the next head coach of the Dallas Wings. Another domino has fallen in the W as another head coaching hire is made. He was a finalist last year. We're going to briefly address this, but ultimately lost out to Coach Chris, now known as Chris K, because he is no longer the head coach of the Dallas Wings, and Chris Koklanis. We are very happy for José, who's been a supporter of this podcast throughout its iteration, and it's wild to think that he is now Paige Bueckers' head coach. Mitch, walk us through how this one came to be.
Yeah, so let's go back a year ago. I think José was very, very interested in the job then. It's my understanding that he didn't. I don't think like Chris K was picked over him necessarily. It was more of like the Wings didn't really come correct on the offer in terms of compensation, and the timing was also bad last year. The Dallas didn't make that hire until almost Christmas. I mean, it was like mid-December. And at that point, USF is, more than 2 months into their season. You'll remember Carl Smesko left a couple games into the season. Lynn Roberts left a couple games into the season. I don't think José wanted to do that. He didn't want to ditch his team, mid-season. And then, the money wasn't right last year. José's contract and salary is public record. Like, it's out there. He made around $850K at USF. I think one of the more well-paid coaches at the mid-major level, and well-deserved. I mean, he has been there 25 years. He was closing in on 500 career wins. He's got, I think, 10 or 12 trips to the NCAA tournament off the top of my head. USF is a mid-major power, has been a mid-major power because of him. He's produced WNBA players. He's regularly beaten Power 4 teams. We had Sammy Puisis on the podcast last year after the Bulls beat Duke. I think, to get him, if he was ever going to leave USF, it probably wasn't going to be for another college job, even though he did go far down the road with Miami 2 years ago. Now, the hurdle with Miami was that he had a very big buyout for not only a women's basketball coach, but also a mid-major women's basketball coach. His buyout was right in the ballpark of $1 million. And so what happened between him talking to the Wings last year and talking to the Wings this year is that his buyout got reduced by two ways. One, there was already a clause in his contract that said if USF had an athletic director change, it would be cut in half. And they had that because Michael Kelly went to Navy.
Interesting. I didn't realize that part of it.
And then he, in the past year, had another bit of language added to his contract about if he left for a WNBA team instead of a college team, his existing buyout would also get cut in half. So really his buyout now for the Wings was a quarter of what it was a year ago. So it was much more manageable for them to pony up to USF to get José.
Interesting. I did not realize that. Although Rob Higgins, now the CEO of USF Athletics, which is a very weird thing to say. I know that they're boys. They both were supporting each other. We know that the Bulls family is very proud of José. Let's get to this part of it all, Mitch. Why did it take this long for the Wings to make this hire if José has been lurking in the wings, pun intended, for so long?
Well, I don't think the Wings were expecting Sandy Brondello to be available as a free agent on the coaching carousel market. And so they did talk to her, and I think they went pretty far down the road with her, and they were interested in her service. Obviously, I don't know if it's been actually like officially out there yet, if like the Tempo ever released a statement, but it's been widely reported.
Howard broke it, which that was after we recorded, or actually we were off last week. So we actually haven't even discussed that Sandy Brondello is now going to be, according to our friend Howard Megdal of the Next, she is going to be the next head coach, the first head coach of the Toronto Tempo, which would also mark the first former player head coach GM tandem in the WNBA set for the 2026 season.
Yeah. And so, that's been widely reported out there. I have no reason to doubt Howard.
Sandy hasn't said anything, which is
and it's been reported by a couple of really good reporters too. So I'm considering that to be true and gospel. So then after that, the candidates were kind of basically, I think it kind of came down to them deciding between two college coaches. I think Nikki Collin was in the mix here, Baylor's head coach, formerly the Atlanta Dream head coach, formerly worked with Kurt Miller with the Connecticut Sun and at Colorado State. So like they have a deep history. I think José is somebody who, I think a lot of people around women's basketball respect his basketball mind. He is the president of the WBCA. He is widely liked. Like you can easily find like Dawn Staley and Gino Auriemma like saying glowing things about this guy. So, just well-liked, well-respected across the sport, knows his stuff, knows the international game really, really well, is somebody who has recruited internationally for a long time, and knows a lot of these players. And I think, knows Gino Auriemma and UConn pretty well. And like, I think Paige arrived right around the time that UConn was going back to the Big East. So, they never had a ton of clashes, but a couple of clashes over the years. And José, I think, was really excited about taking this job because of, I think the reason he was attracted was because of not just Paige, but also the other young pieces around her. There is an opportunity here to build, to really mold this team in your vision. I think that the Wings, after hiring Chris Kay last year, someone who had no experience as a head coach whatsoever at any level, they went the other way this year. Let's hire the guy who's been a head coach at USF for 25 years and has gone to the NCAA tournament in half of them.
Let's continue, because I could do a whole podcast on why José was the right hire to that point. This idea of, will we see more college coaches after initially your sources said, Mitch, we didn't think we'd see more Lynn Roberts, Carl Semesco-esque hires. Will we continue to see more of those suddenly here in the 2025 hiring cycle? But we have to keep it moving, because we had another hire on the West Coast as Sonia Raman, the long time, or I shouldn't say long time. She was a New York Liberty assistant this past season. She previously spent 4 seasons as an assistant with the Memphis Grizzlies in the NBA, the first Indian American woman to ever be hired as an NBA assistant. Long time, which warms my heart as a D3 product myself. Longtime head coach at MIT, spent her entire career, her upbringing, her college career in the state of Massachusetts, as not only was she the head coach of MIT from 2008 to 2020, she was an assistant at Wellesley outside of Boston. She played at Tufts. It's one of those that I think, again, a lot of people outside of the women's basketball sphere maybe are shaking their heads and saying, what? How? But again, What did I just say? Previous head coaching experience, whether that is at the D3 level for an extended period of time, at the group of 4, group of 5, whatever, how many number groups we're calling it these days with USF, with José, that is winning out compared to a Chris K who, oh, that's great. You've been a long-time W assistant, a long-time associate head coach at the college level. Like, that's great. We need someone who has run a program before, whether that's at whatever level of college or at the professional ranks. That's who we need to run our operation.
Yeah. And, while Dallas and Seattle went in this direction, and I think we would all say those are 2 really good hires and they make sense and you can sell them. Then you have Portland, who decided to hire, an NBA assistant.
Let's also not bury the lead, Mitch, that they may or may not have gotten scooped. Then they leaked their own press release
on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Shout out LinkedIn. Shutdown Fullcast is smiling somewhere. Spencer is laughing because it was linked on LinkedIn, which is just leaked on LinkedIn. Try to say that 5 times fast, folks. Now the question remains, though. There is still one head coach vacancy in the WNBA, and it is a biggie, Mitch. What do you think the New York Liberty are going to do? I know you've been predicting it for weeks and months, but it's kind of weird that is now the final domino that has to fall.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of surprised that they haven't made a hire yet. Because I think it seemed like, just considering the players that they have, Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu. Although, we do have some free agency coming up, and will those players come back? I don't know, but I just, considering the resources that the Liberty have, I'm surprised it's taken them this long to find a new head coach. Lindsey Harding, Christy Tolliver, I think they are the ones who are most likely, at this point, just considering the market, to go in the direction of one of a former player, someone who we remember seeing play 10 years ago, 15 years ago, who has been a head coach or an assistant coach or whatever for a couple of years now, whether that's in the NBA or the W.
It's just wild because that was the first domino to fall when they surprisingly cut ties with Sandy Brondello. Right. We knew that Portland and Toronto were obviously going to be open because they are expansion franchises, but then that's what opens the door in Dallas. I guess Seattle technically was first, but that was kind of like they were operating on their own little island. But certainly, to your point, you would think that the Wings vacancy was prompted by the idea of, we could get Sandy. That could be appetizing, even though now she has chosen to head north of the border, according to multiple reports. Let's keep it moving with this week's starting 5. I'm going to go back to back here, Mitch, because I want to put all the breaking news in the W, all the juicy stuff of note, not noted in this week's starting 5. Maybe we'll hit it in last call at the end. We are recording this podcast on October the 28th. Of course, the CBA deadline, October the 31st. No real updates that have been reported up to this point. So maybe in the next, 40 minutes or so as we're recording this podcast, maybe we'll get some sort of clarity as we inch closer and closer to that deadline for a CBA negotiation of some kind to be had, to be settled, reached, or extended when it comes to the conversations between Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, the owners, and the Players Association. But the other juicy news from around the WNBA, Lexie Hull, one of 5 WNBA players who appeared on the cover of Glamour magazine. The intent was to show sisterhood, but of course, because it's the Indiana Fever, that can't happen. We have to talk about Caitlin. We have to talk about Divide, because that's just the way the world works. Some of the quotes from Lexie that have made the headlines and I think have buried the lead of, again, the sisterhood, the fact that Nafisa Collier, Jonquel Jones, the Sabali sisters were also on the cover of Glamour with Lexie. I digress. Quote, there is a level of jealousy when it comes to the Fever just because of the media attention and the fans that have shown up for us ever since Caitlin got here. We've heard people and players and teams talking in their locker room about how we can't let the Fever win. Before I get to the quotes about DeWanna Bonner, which are much more fascinating for the in the weeds, nuanced listeners of this podcast, your thoughts, Mitchell Northam.
I'm just catching up about. I didn't know that Lexie Hull was in Glamour magazine. I don't really. You might be surprised to learn this.
We're bringing you the hot, topics in the world of women's basketball right off the top.
Yeah, no, you might be surprised to learn this, but Glamour magazine is not something I regularly pay attention to. Yeah, this quote, I think there's a level of jealousy when it comes to the Fever, just because of the media attention the fans have shown up for us ever since Caitlin got here. I think it's easy to see that. I don't know that that's the way I would characterize it. I don't know. Every time we have these like big picture discussions about the Fever and Caitlin Clark and are the players jealous and do the players hate her and is it because she's white and blah 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 blah. I just kind of get exhausted very quickly. But
let's get to the other quote then, because the other quote actually relates to basketball, and maybe this is a little bit juicier because it does relate to a team that made the WNBA finals in the Phoenix Mercury. Lexie Hull reflecting upon DeWanna Bonner's sudden exit from the Indiana Fever mid-season. Quote, "I was super, super, super," 3 supers, excited because finally there's a player at my position that I can look up to. I can learn something from her. And then she randomly leaves and we're all just kind of like, what happened? We were never given an explanation. To have no explanation was really challenging.
Yeah. I don't know. I still don't really know what to make of the DeWanna Bonner stuff. I keep going back to it. It's kind of funny, history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. And when the Fever did that Sports Illustrated cover
right.
before the preseason, and then DeWanna Bonner left and like they got off to kind of that terrible start, I tweeted out the Sports Illustrated cover of Steve Nash and Dwight Howard in Lakers uniforms, and they were like, this is going to be fun. DeWanna Bonner, that experiment did not work, right? In any way. And I don't know, it sounds like Lexie was expecting DeWanna to come in and kind of be a mentor and
take her spot, and she was okay with that.
Yeah, maybe DeWanna didn't want a mentor. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what happened there. It's very strange to me.
Yeah, it's an anomaly to say the least.
Yeah.
That's for certain. All right, let's round out this week's starting 5. As we noted, Mitch has already been to a women's college basketball game, and the season doesn't tip off for less than another week, 6 days' time, but who's counting? And you also have some notes on an upcoming game in your neck of the woods-ish, maybe your stomping grounds, I should say, Mitch. So
stomping grounds, yeah.
Yes, number 4 and number 5 of this week's starting 5 go to you. Where would you like to begin, sir?
We'll begin at the United States Naval Academy. Thursday was a busy breaking news day. A couple hours after, it's funny, I was actually, when I heard about the José to Dallas stuff and had that confirmed, I was walking into Carmichael Arena at UNC because North Carolina was having a media day. And I just sat in the corner during Courtney Bankhart's press conference and wrote my story about José. And then a couple hours later, I hear that the game between Louisville and UConn, that's going to be on Tuesday, November 4th. It is the Armed Forces Classic. It was supposed to be played in Germany. It is now going to be played at the U.S. Naval Academy. So it's being moved because we are now this is Tuesday, October 28th. We are now in day 28 of the government shutdown. I believe, second longest shutdown in U.S. history, trailing only the one that happened in 2018. Same person was in office. I wonder if that's a coincidence. Moving on. This game is going to be played at the U.S. Naval Academy now. It was supposed to be played at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, but basically with the shutdown, you have all of these, active duty military members and other federal employees aren't being paid right now. And so a lot of operations and resources and facilities are kind of scaling back operations. And it sounds like the folks at Ramstein Air Base just stopped talking to ESPN, probably because there was no one there to communicate with them like on an official basis. Like I imagine, the public relations person for Ramstein Air Base is not like an essential employee. That would just be my guess. And so ESPN Events, who is organizing this thing and has, for 15 years or whatever, they had to figure out, okay, are we going to roll the dice here with the shutdown going into November, or are we just going to find a new spot for this? And are we going to be able to find a spot that's like, this is supposed to be a game that kind of celebrates veterans in the military and all that good stuff. And so are we going to be able to find a place that appropriately does that? So they looked at Washington, D.C. They also looked at Atlanta. They were looking at maybe even playing this game closer to Louisville or UConn's campuses. Ultimately, I think they made the right call here. I think the Naval Academy is an awesome place for this. Now, if you're wondering, okay, well, you just told us all about the government shutdown. Why isn't the Naval Academy affected? So the Naval Academy's athletic department actually operates as a nonprofit that is independent from the Department of Defense and the federal government. So, whenever like you've had government shutdowns and stuff like that, you've noticed Navy doesn't stop playing football or anything like that. So, they're good. So the Naval Academy is good. They're going to have people there. I think it's going to be awesome. I think Alumni Hall is a cool venue. Yep. If you've never been there before and you live in the area, I would encourage you to go. It's a really just cool place to see a basketball game. And Annapolis is awesome. So go hang out in Annapolis.
Yeah, I was going to say this is somehow going to be turned into a victory because the administration you were alluding to loves to take victory laps, even if Mitch likes to humble and not take victory laps when he breaks news. Because I do think that Annapolis is awesome, and I do think this is a cool venue, and I do think it's going to be a great game, which we're going to have previews of both those squads here a little bit later in the show. You also got to see a game in Greensboro this week. What did we learn, Mitch, when you were boots on the ground for Maryland NC State?
Yeah. I'll just touch on these quickly because we're about to dive into these two teams more. NC State pulled away late. I thought it was a really good competitive game. On Maryland, it is apparent to me that Aluchi Okanawa, the transfer from Duke, who was the ACC tournament MVP last year, she is, I think, the bus driver of the Maryland Terrapins now.
No way.
She had the ball in her hands a lot. Like, I don't want to call her like de facto point guard, but it is very much clear to me that Brenda is empowering her to kind of like make decisions and seek her shot and also to like run the transition offense. So Aluchi, she played really, really well. She had 21 points, 7 rebounds or something like that. NC State, real quick, they played better than they did against High Point in that exhibition. You got better games from Zoe Brooks, kind of their big three, I think, this year. Zoe Brooks, Tilda Trigger, and Camille Pierre, the transfer from Vanderbilt. I think for NC State to have a good season, like, you probably need all three of those players playing really well on most nights. And if there's a night where one of them is off, that might mean that you lose. Or it might mean that it's close, or it might mean that you need someone else to step up, like a Zam Jones or a Caden Samuels or something like that. I think like they have a really strong starting five. Beyond that, I have some questions.
Hey,
and we'll get into that.
We told you guys that the starting five, our 5 biggest storylines in the world of women's basketball before we get to preview season, would be spicy. That is a spicy observation takeaway from an exhibition game. I did all this nice research, and now maybe it's just thrown out the window. All my thoughts about what Garzon's transfer in could mean for Maryland. Is Kayleen Smikle going to be the true bus driver? The idea of Brenda Fries having an actual roster coming back from a season ago compared to, that's right, when just Cheyenne Sellers came back. We're going to dive into all that when we get to the Big Ten.
So I will say, Kayleen Smikle did not play in that game. Just hampered by some nagging injuries, but I don't know. I think Aluchi can be kind of. I think if Smikle is your number 2, that's great. You're in a really good position. And that Garzon, I think she is adjusting to maybe playing more in the front court under Brenda, or instead of just like hanging out on the wing. But I think that her and Poffenbarger both give them a lot of versatility and options in the paint.
And maybe that's going to bode well when we make our final 4 predictions at the end of the episode as well. Spoiler alert. Let's get to our conference previews here on the Women's Basketball Podcast. Here's the assignment, folks. We each were given a conference or 2, or maybe 3, to evaluate 3 big things. Could be a team, could be a player, could be a storyline. That's what we have for you for each conference. Let's begin with the Power 4. Mitch, you will kick us off with the conference that is near and dear to both your heart and your geographic location in the Atlantic Coast Conference. What are our 3 big things? And then go back to number 1 and dive right in.
Yeah. Number 1, I think Duke is your elite team in this conference. 2, I think State and Carolina can be, but I need some questions answered, and we'll find that out, I think, in the first couple weeks of the season. 3, Virginia, you need results this year, or things are going to get prickly, I think, for Coach Mox. So circling back to Duke, I've talked to a couple different coaches in and around and outside of the ACC. Mostly outside of the ACC has been interesting because everybody's like, what the ACC seems kind of down this year or wide open, what's going on there? But everybody kind of agrees, like, if there's one team that has the best shot of making a Final Four, it's probably Duke. And I agree. This team was moments away, maybe one questionable decision away from beating South Carolina in the Elite Eight last year. They won the ACC tournament last season, and they bring back 4 starters from that team, a group that does not include ACC Rookie of the Year Toby Fournier, who was coming off the bench all of last season. They are then adding to that mix Emily Skinner, the number 4 recruit in the nation, who Kara Lawson is very, very, very high on. I have never heard Kara Lawson talk about a freshman in this way before in my couple of years covering her. So I expect Emily Skinner, 6'1" point guard from Utah, to have a big impact for the Blue Devils this year. Also, they're essentially adding 2 McDonald's All-Americans as well, even though these players were on their roster last year. They were just injured. And they are players with size and talent and potential. One of them is Riley Nelson, who transferred to Duke from Maryland. She hasn't played in, I think, almost a year and a half, but she is ready to go. And the other is Ariana Robertson, who is a 6'4" redshirt freshman, San Antonio, Texas. Very good, help them out with rim protection and all that good stuff this year. So, I think that Duke is your team to beat this year. I think we all expect Toby to keep getting better and taking a step forward kind of in her development. I think that Kara Lawson's stock is very high right now, Team USA coach and, coming off an ACC title and all that. And to kind of segue into my second point, right now, I don't see a legitimate challenger to them at the top.
Right. Well, I think that it's the roster. Like, if only on paper. That is as deep a roster as you're going to find in the ACC. One quick note on Duke, just because then we will get to the Big Ten after you rattle through the rest of the ACC, Mitch. Mm-hmm. Why did Alucci transfer, in your opinion? Because I think that will build into that role at Maryland that you witnessed in the exhibition game in Greensboro, in my opinion.
How do I say this without getting in trouble? I think that... Okay,
so it's that. I thought it was going to be because with Toby Fournier stepping into more of a leading role.
I think it was too... There, you could swing it a couple ways. I think, like, if you said that she wanted to have a bigger role and didn't want to come off the bench again as a junior, you wouldn't be wrong in saying that. I also think that maybe there was some money questions.
Yeah, compensation. NIL compensation. We're allowed to say that out loud. That's okay.
Yeah,
NIL compensation. And also she has the ball in her hands. To your point, if only just because Kayleen Smikle didn't play in that exhibition.
Yeah, I think, being attracted to, a situation at Maryland where, by the way, like I'm pretty confident the Alucci is from the DMV. I believe. So, like, you're going home. She's from Boston. Oh, Jaden Donovan is from the DMV. I always get those two mixed up. Anyways, you go to Maryland, you have the ball in your hands, you get to play with Brenda Freeze. You're starting. I mean, that, I think that's a pretty good reason why we'll get this into this in our SEC preview, but I think that's a pretty good reason why Malaysia Fulwiley probably transferred, and it's interesting because she might not be starting this year. But we'll get to that. A
lot of teases. Get to number 2 and 3 from the ACC.
Yeah, so I'll just go through, I think that, my second point, State and Carolina can be contenders and they could swoop in and kind of steal this title from Duke this year, but they have some questions that they need to answer. I think for North Carolina, it is in the front court. You lost your all-time leading rebounder in Alyssa Utsby. You lost 6'5" Maria Gokdang. Who is stepping up and filling that role? Is it going to be Blanca Thomas? Is it going to be Sierra Toomey? Are you going to play small ball maybe instead? And Nyla Harris at center and do something kind of creative. Those are two really big questions I have with Carolina. Just what are you doing in the front court? I think the guard play is great. They have great depth on the wings. The freshmen, I think, are going to play a big part this year. We'll see how that goes. At NC State, I think, number one, I have a question about Zoe Brooks's. Last year she was the third option, right? She's playing along two WNBA draft picks in Isaiah James and Sanaya Rivers. Is she ready to be night in and night out on a consistent basis, the number one option, the bus driver for the NC State Wolfpack? I'm not sure yet. She played really well against Maryland. She did not play really well against High Point. I think we need to, she's a junior. I think the timing is right for kind of a handoff like this. But I just need to see it on a night in, night out basis. Camille Pierre, how quickly can we get her acclimated? Again, she's somebody who didn't really play that well against High Point, played really well against Maryland. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not entirely sure. I think a lot of people are expecting Zam Jones to be a replacement level guard for a backcourt mate. Zam Jones is not Isaiah James. So you gotta figure that out. I think Caden Samuels can be Madison Hayes potentially. And then I get to Total Trigger, and I kind of think Total Trigger is the best player in this lineup. And I know that Total Trigger, Wes Moore likes to play that 4-out, 1-in system. Can Total Trigger be as good as or better than Elisa Cunane, who led this team to 3 straight ACC titles a couple years ago? That's the question there. I'll quickly get to the Virginia point real quick. Virginia, I think Coach Amaka Guga-Hamilton has done a good job in the post-Tina Thompson era of restoring, fandom and pride and respectability and competence to Virginia. They have fan support back. They have investment in that program. Old boy who's married to Serena, who co-founded Reddit. I always forget his name.
Lexie Ohanian.
Yeah. So he's a Virginia grad. He donated millions of. Yeah, he donated a big gift to this program and NIL stuff. It's year 4 this season. We haven't made an NCAA tournament yet. I think Virginia, considering the investment and the fan support that you have there, also because they don't have to fire the head football coach now, and they figured out the men's basketball team. They got Ryan Odom. So now, women's basketball, if someone's looking for something to complain about at Virginia, they're looking at you.
Right. And the baseball and the lacrosse teams have largely figured it out.
So I think this year, if they don't make the NCAA tournament, I don't think she's going to get fired at the end of the year unless it goes Titanic bad. But if they don't make the NCAA tournament, I think things are very, very uncomfortable for her next year. And we'll see what happens. But I think Virginia has all the resources. And has everything, it has its house in order now. And now the expectation is that you go win. You have the investment and the resources, you have the players, you hit the portal hard this year. You still got Kimora Johnson, who's one of the best guards in the ACC. Time to go win something.
Those are the 3 big things to know in the ACC ahead of the 25-26 season. Here are my 3 big things to know when it comes to the Big Ten, stretching from the Pacific to the Atlantic. Number 1, UCLA is firmly in tier number 1. No one else is in tier 1, although should they be? In tier 2, we find Maryland and Michigan State. That's number 2 for me and my 3 big things. Curious to see if puzzle pieces for Maryland that have been brought in and Michigan's big 3 sophomores now after being their big 3 freshmen, if they can take the next step. Maybe that catapults them into tier 1 with UCLA, who I do have questions about. And finally, because any Big Ten preview in women's basketball would not be complete without the Iowa Hawkeyes, I did relay, by the way, a little screenshot of today's rundown to our sometimes co-host Rebecca Kopelman, Mitch. And she, of course, was outraged that I did not have in our Dark Horse segment later in the show. I did not have Jan Jensen's Iowa Hawkeyes. Number 3 in my 3 things to know for the Big Ten. Iowa is a year away from being in the top 10, top 15 once more. But I do think if the chit chat right transfer hits, we could be looking at a top 25 Iowa again. We will get to that here in a second. Let's begin with the Bruins out on the West Coast. They returned 7 of their 8 players in their primary rotation. The new 8th player in their rotation, the number 2 recruit in the country from a year ago, Sienna Betts, the younger sister of the preseason Big Ten Player of the Year, Lauren Betts. Going to be very fascinated to see how Corey Close chooses to play those two, either in the same lineup with the high-low at the 5 and the 4, the 2 sisters Betts, or is Sienna truly just Lauren's backup at the 5? I have concerns about this team. I'm going to make a college football analogy that I think producer Dimitri is going to be laughing somewhere when I say it. Let's begin with this. It's something we've discussed on this podcast before. I still have questions about Lauren Betts and Kiki Rice when the lights are the brightest. They split with USC a year ago. Of course, USC had Kiki Ariaffin and a healthy Juju Watkins, and they were also the number 1 team in the country at one point in time and a perennial top 10 team. But I have questions about UCLA, who spent the bulk of the regular season as the number 1 team in the land and yet flamed out when postseason came. When push came to shove. Not flamed out, that's probably too strong of a word. Here's a better terminology for it, or at least better evidence. Corey Close and her game management decisions are something we've discussed on this podcast as being an Achilles heel for the Bruins since 2011 when she became the head coach. She's 321 and 143 in Westwood. They have made 1 Elite 8, 0 Final Fours, 5 Sweet 16s. That's cool. So is Iowa since that same time. Who's counting? I believe that
one Final Four last year.
What's that?
I said 1 Final Four last year.
Oh, right. Sorry, I forgot. Sorry.
Before last year. Yes, I understand what you're saying.
Before last year. So
we have questions.
1 Final Four, and then what happened? I believe. Well, here's a guy who made the Final Four. I believe that Corey Close is the James Franklin of women's college basketball. I don't think she can win the big one. I have concerns what happens when she goes up against ranked teams, when they are actually in postseason play. James Franklin also made a Final Four in the college football playoff last year. He is now out of a job at Penn State, another one of the greatest jobs in the sport, much like this job at UCLA currently stands. Mitch, am I going too over the top with my concerns about the Bruins not having that dog in them?
No, I don't think so. I don't want to sound like a hater, but I feel
bad, but
I've told people this before. Every time I watch UCLA live, I come away incredibly unimpressed by Kiki Rice. And like she has all this hype and has the name, and WNBA scouts are like, "Oh my God, Kiki Rice," and I'm just kind of like,
she's in an ESPN Plus series with Caitlin Clark. Oh my God.
Like, I don't know. I don't see what the big deal about Kiki Rice is. I think, like, if you hadn't had me pick one, I think Lauren Betts does have that dog in her and is getting that dog in her, and kind of warming up to that. I think we saw that a little bit in the NCAA tournament last year, like when they beat LSU in the Elite 8. Like, that was a big time performance by Lauren Betts. They did, play well against USC in those 2 regular season, or no, they got swept by USC in the regular season. They beat them for the Big Ten tournament title. But yeah, UCLA, they'll probably win the Big Ten again. Gianna Neepkins is also a great pickup for them. The 3-point shooter from Utah. I think one of probably the best 3-point shooter available in the portal. I wonder like how different of a dimension she gives them, and does she take the ball out of Kiki Rice's hands a little bit more? But the James Franklin thing, I think that's kind of an apt analogy. Like, you can win the conference, maybe you can kind of get there, but can you count on Corey Close? Okay, let's assume they get to the Final Four this year. Who else is going to be there, right? Can you count on Corey Close to out-coach Kim Mulkey, Gino Auriemma, Dawn Staley, Kara Lawson, Brenda Freeze.
Yeah. No.
I would say no. I would bet against that.
Yeah. And it's almost too apt and too on the nose. I don't think she's going to get fired if they lose in the Final Four the next year.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah. Handbasket. But it should be noted, again, this is the year. They have pushed all their chips firmly to the middle of the table. And while, yes, Sienna Betts will still have 2-3 years more of eligibility after this, like, this is the team that Corey Close has been building towards. Let's see what she does with it. Tier 2, number 2, my 3 big things to know in the Big Ten. Again, the idea of Indiana transfer, all-time leader in 3-point baskets made, Yarden Garzone coming over to the Maryland Terrapins, coupled with Alucci coming over from Duke, the ACC sixth woman from a season ago. We already referenced what that can bring to this team on not only the defensive side, but the offensive end of the floor. Brenda Freeze had to replace all but one player 1 year ago. That is a storyline that we quickly forgot about because Maryland was able to make a run in the NCAA tournament. They bring back Bree McDaniel as well. You mentioned Sailor Poffenberger. This is a team that I think has a lot of interesting pieces that are both new and old. I'm curious to see how they mesh. In the same vein, Michigan's fantastic freshman from a year ago certainly gave South Carolina a scare in the early month of the season. Olivia Olson ultimately was their leading scorer in 24-25, averaging 16.3 points per game. Sylvia Swartz had 6.3 rebounds per game to lead them on the boards. And then Mila Holloway, 4.4 assists per game. Can Michigan do it again? Because and it's really hard, as many of you have found in the lead up to the college hoop season, both on the men's and the women's side, it's really hard to base predictions off of anything other than they've got this many returners and this is what we saw proof of concept from a year ago. And so that's why I look at those two squads and there's enough returners and proof of concept that by adding here and there, does that raise the floor or does it in turn create more questions because you're trying to fit square pegs into circle holes?
Yeah, I think Michigan has a good chance to be one of the top 4 teams in the Big Ten and maybe make the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. You mentioned they bring back those 3 sophomores who were all really, really good in different spots last year. They also they got the transfer from Bucknell, whose name I'm going to butcher, Sofulkanic, first name Ashley. She's going to be awesome. I think for them, they got Kendall Dudley from UCLA, one of the transfers out of the Bruins this year. I think they're going to be pretty solid. I think Maryland is, I think your top 4 in some order is going to be UCLA, USC, Maryland, and Michigan. Although
many people believe USC will take a step back without Juju Watkins. Again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to dive into it. I just encourage you to go look up Jazzy. That's all I'm going to tell you if you want to know more about USC. Mm-hmm. If you want to talk about, hey, who could be a standout performer without Juju Watkins playing college basketball this season, just Google USC Jazzy. Maybe that'll change your mind. Okay.
USC is going to be fun.
Yes, to the Iowa of it all. Chit Chat Right, 7.2 points per game at Georgia Tech last year. Georgia Tech had a fire sale after turning over their coaching staff. Not exactly stats that will wow you, but she has that 94 feet speed and vision that I think Iowa's going to need a veteran point guard, especially after they lost Aaliyah Guyton in the transfer portal to Illinois with the hope that she would be the point guard of the future. Addie Deal comes in, the most heralded recruit since Caitlin Clark. She's going to be starting at the 2, your combo guard. I think equally as important, what do we see in year 2 from Iowa's fantastic freshman from a season ago and Taylor Stremlow, Ava Hayden, and then Tegan Malagany, who all made the starting lineup at different points throughout the course of the 2024-2025 season. I think the development of those players, plus, if Chit Chat hits, I think that that's going to calm the waters. But ultimately, this is supposed to be Hannah Stolke's team. And I don't want to put the Cedar Rapids native on notice, but I don't know if she is a bus driver, to be frank. I think she needs at least a Robin. She can be Batman so long as she has Robin. And without Sydney Fulter, who ran out of eligibility but is on staff. And meanwhile, Kylie Feuerbach somehow has eligibility. I don't know how she does, but Sid doesn't. I'm not going to dive into that. I don't think she's Robin. And so in turn, I think that one of those sophomores or Chit Chat has to take that role while yes, the hope is that Addie Deal becomes the next Caitlin Clark and everybody rejoices in Iowa City and they did it again, I think that Iowa remains a year away from being back to top 10 household names across the board on the roster.
Yeah, I think just on Stalky real quick, I think a lot of times last year she deferred to Lucy Olson and to Sid and some of those other players. I think you need her to be more assertive this season. And I think that they put, maybe the right pieces around her, Chit Chat Wright, Addie Deal, some of these other players. I think Iowa's going to be pretty good this year. They're going to make the tournament. I think the question
they're going
is
to make the tournament. I want to be clear. They're going to make the tournament, folks. And
the
they'll probably
is,
cover around the top 25.
Yeah, I think the question is for them is like, okay, can you be good enough to where you're getting a top 16 seed, or are you going to be, like a 7, 8, 9 seed again?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's keep it moving with our 3 things to know from the Big 12. Mitch, rattle them off, and then we'll get back to number 1, which I hate to say it, but this is why people come to talk about the Big 12 in 2025, 2026.
Yeah, I'm going to go through these super quickly. Olivia Miles is at TCU. You should not sleep on Oklahoma State. And there's a couple of players in this league that I feel like we've forgotten about. So I just want to remind folks. So first off, TCU, last year, they go to the Elite Eight for the first time ever. They win the Big 12 for the first time ever, and then basically lose the entire roster due to graduation and other stuff. You had like a 28-year-old playing center for you, and you had a 24-year-old playing point guard. Haley Van Lith and Sidonia Prince were both in college for a long time. The rest of this roster kind of got reshuffled to the nucleus, the bus driver for this team. I think the person that is going to decide whether or not they are Big 12 champs again and a serious contender again is Olivia Miles, transferred here from Notre Dame. One of the best point guards in the country, someone who has improved a lot as a scorer and a three-point shooter too, to go into addition to already being a great passer. She is, she made this decision to leave Notre Dame, to leave Hannah Hidalgo, to leave Nella Ivy, to forego the WNBA draft, where she probably would have been the top 3, 4, 5 pick last year, to come to TCU. And we'll see how this experiment goes. I think it's super interesting. I think it's something where, like, if it goes well, it's like, okay, is Mark Campbell actually the point guard whisperer? If it goes poorly, I don't know. I think this roster is too talented for it to go very poorly. In addition to Olivia Miles, they brought in Marta Suarez from Cal. They brought in Clara Silva, 6'7", center from Portugal, who was previously at Kentucky. They have pieces around Olivia Miles. It's not going to be just her alone. I also kind of think Olivia Miles is just a better player than Haley Van Lith. So we'll see. I think like it's kind of an upgraded point guard. Now you have some things to figure out sort of everywhere else on the roster. Like, who is your knockdown 3-point shooter than Madison Connor was last year? So they have to figure that out. Oklahoma State,
Joe Girardi's daughter. That much I do know.
Went to the NCAA tournament last year under JC Hoyt. Really great season for them. I think they're going to have another really, really good year. I think potentially be a Big 12 title challenger. I think potentially be a top 16 seed in the NCAA tournament. The bus driver for this team is Staley Hurd, junior guard, who was really, really good last year. And yeah, they made some additions to the roster. One of them is a big-time recruit in Luna Girardi, who is the daughter of, former New York Yankees manager Joe Girardi.
We'll give the Phillies some love.
I also hate the Phillies as much as I hate the Yankees. They also got BYU transfer Amari Whiting, who's going to help them out a lot. They also got a transfer from South Dakota State and Haley Timmer, who's going to help them out a lot. I just think it's a really good roster, and I think that they're going to kind of take the next step this year and be a real contender in that league and somebody that we should keep an eye on.
I agree. And certainly to the point of Olivia Miles and Mark Campbell building a roster, I think that if Mark Campbell hits with Olivia Miles, do you think he leaves for another job, whether that's in college or the WNBA? Because at that point in time, between his work with Sabrina Ionescu as an assistant at Oregon, then the reclamation project of Haley Van Lith, bringing Olivia Miles back to where she wants to be. By the way, she said this was not about elevating her stock for the W. She recognized she could have gone to the WNBA this past draft cycle, but ultimately and I agree with a lot of folks who tear their ACL and they feel like it's that second year after the tear that they really reach back to peak performance. She felt like, especially as a scorer, there was still more work to be done. And obviously not having to share a backcourt with Hannah Hidalgo maybe will help elevate that part of your game.
Maybe not tapping share a locker room with her, I think.
Listen, no, she has no. What did she tell you, Mitch? She told you at ACC Media Days, nothing but love, nothing but love.
Sure. I don't know Mark Campbell well enough to know kind of what his ambitions are. I think that certainly if TCU has another really good season, he's probably heading for Extensionville at the very least. But in this day of college basketball, it's kind of like if you're at a job like TCU, which, historically has not been a power in women's college basketball, but if the money faucet is turned on for you and you feel like you can build a roster that can consistently go to the Elite Eight, you just kind of have to decide, like, all right, do I want to be here? Or can I do this somewhere else? I mean, Kelly Graves is not a spring chicken. Like, if he retires at some point, I believe he's in his early to mid 60s. Does Mark Campbell go back to Oregon? I don't know. That's interesting to me. But he certainly has a cooking right now at TCU. I think last year we'll see if that was a one-hit wonder or not, or if it can be replicated this year with this kind of portal class he has.
I hate to say it because there's three things to know, but the Big 12, it runs through Fort Worth. Safe to say. Like that's just kind of the assessment.
Yeah, I think so. And
it's Fort Worth or bust.
Yeah, I'll hit on just my third point, which is a couple players we forgot about. So BYU, they have a new head coach in Lee Cummard. They bring back Big 12 Rookie of the Year, whose name escapes me, Delaney Gibb, who was awesome last year and was also awesome this summer for Canada in the FIBA tournaments. Another player that they're getting back this year who did not play last year, remember this is BYU, because she was on a LDS mission, is Kaylee Woolston, who as a freshman was 13th in the nation in three-point shooting at 46.6%. So you get her back and pair her with Delaney Gibb. I think that's a very interesting and very good combination for BYU. They also got a transfer from the College of Charleston, who was a really good player in that league. So I think BYU is going to be better this year. I don't know if they're going to be tournament good, but I think they are a team that is worth watching. Second player I wanted to mention real quick, whose name I'm going to butcher, and I apologize. Nastja Klaasens, who is a Belgian forward with Olympic experience and who is drafted by the Washington Mystics in 2024. She is going to play for the Kansas State Wildcats this year. If you want to read more about her, you can just Google her name and my name together. My story at SB Nation from the summer should pop up, where I outlined how it is possible for a former WNBA draft pick to play college basketball. And
don't get Tom Izzo started on that one. Continue.
What the situation is with her draft rights and all that good stuff. Third player that I wanted to touch on real quick is Kateri Poole. Do you remember her from LSU? So Kateri Poole did not play last year, but she was at Houston. She was injured and she didn't play. She's still at Houston, and Houston is a new head coach, Matthew Mitchell, coming out of retirement to take this job. So she's just someone I think that's worth keeping an eye on, who is very much like in the zeitgeist of the LSU stuff a couple of years ago when we had all that drama with Angel Reese following the title and all that good stuff. So Kateri Poole at Houston. Those are some Big 12 players that you should remember.
Speaking of LSU, let's hit our three big things to know when it comes to the Southeastern Conference. It was funny, Mitch. I was listening to our contemporaries at No Off Season, the Athletics Women's Basketball Show, and they were like, why is our preview show seemingly all Big Ten, all SEC? Welcome to college sports in 2025. We know you have lots of questions about the Southeastern Conference. Let's hit the three big things to know. Number one, the headliner, Tanaya Latson, leaves Florida State to go to South Carolina. And in a three-way trade in which the Noles received nothing, Mylasia Fulwiley leaves leaves her native Columbia, South Carolina, to go play at LSU for Kim Mulkey. Maybe the Tigers will send Florida State a player to be named later. I don't know. I don't think enough is being made, though, Mitch, about this swap and both of those players who can, at their best, be the most electric players in the sport, actually fitting into the system in Columbia and in Baton Rouge. Number 2 thing to know, Texas. Are we not talking about them? Like, I don't know why, because they bring a lot of pieces back from a team that was pretty darn good a season ago. So we're going to talk about Texas, because I don't know why we're not talking about them. I think it's because of the aforementioned Malaysia Fulwiley, Tania Latson pseudo trade. Yes, Mitch.
I think it's because Texas is boring.
We will discuss. Number 3 thing to know in the SEC, a team that is not boring, if only off the court, thanks to the number 1 recruit in the country committing to Jenny Baranczyk and the Sooners, that being Aaliyah Chavez. Oklahoma, 5th in the SEC preseason media and coaches poll. Number 1 team most likely to make the Elite 8 out of this conference, if only because the heralded recruit has spoken it into existence in the state of Oklahoma. Let's go back to the top now. The trade. It wasn't a trade, but I'm going to call it a trade. I have questions, Mitch, from the perspective of, number 1, yes, Malaysia Fulwiley may not even start in the backcourt for LSU. The whole point of leaving South Carolina was to have more of a leading role. Is she even going to play for Kim Mulkey? Kim Mulkey, despite the fact that, yes, she has Flau'jae Johnson back, and this is a team that is predicated on guard play. Kim Mulkey, historically, she runs her offense through her defense and through her forwards. And while Kate Koval comes down from Notre Dame to hang out with her brother in Baton Rouge, everybody's moving down to Louisiana, from Brian Kelly to the Koval family. Everybody wants to move down. Well, maybe not Brian Kelly anymore. I think that's an interesting dynamic. And will Kim shift philosophically for what her roster indicates? I know Dawn Staley will. I also think this idea of Tania Latson is just going to be inserted into the lineup and South Carolina's offensive production is going to skyrocket is also questionable when you consider that while we love to talk about Kim Caldwell, the head coach of Tennessee, and the hockey shift rotation that she employs with a 10-woman rotation, Dawn Staley was honestly rocking like a 9-10-woman rotation last year. When your leading scorer averages 12.7 points per game, that suggests that you're getting a lot of fresh legs on the floor each and every night. And it also suggests that Tania Latson's 28 points per game clip probably not going to be matched at South Carolina unless there are some dramatic shifts in philosophy.
Yeah. On LSU real quick, I find all the preseason, everything I'm hearing from Kim Mulkey very interesting because it sounds a lot like Dawn Staley last year. Like the stuff, like I've seen multiple press conferences now where she's like, yeah, Malaysia's not really quite ready to play point guard. Like she's still got some things to learn. And, you know, Kim Mulkey as a coach, like this has been well documented. Like if you play in point guard for her, you can't be turning that thing over. And Malaysia Fulwiley, we saw at South Carolina, got yanked and benched for turning that thing over. So for all of Malaysia Fulwiley's talents and all that good stuff, I'm interested to see how this season goes for her at LSU and what her role in that is, because it's like, you know, they do have a pretty deep backcourt and they do have some options there. And who's going to get the ball in their hands more is going to be something interesting to watch, especially in Flau'jae Johnson's senior year. Like you got to think the ball's going to be in her hands a lot. On South Carolina, I don't want to doubt South Carolina, but I am starting to come up with some more questions about how good this team can be with the injuries. And with Dawn is going to have to count on transfers and young players this year. And I wonder how that's going to go. Like you have Raven Johnson as kind of like your veteran presence. How well is Tania Latson going to fit into this team? Are you going to be willing to give her the keys to the offense from time to time? In the front court, are Medina Ocote and Joyce Edwards going to be good enough? Because I think this is a South Carolina team. You mentioned like how deep her bench went last year. This is a team where like Raven Johnson and Joyce Edwards and maybe a couple other players are going to have to play north of 30 minutes a game. Like I think, you know, they only have 10 players. like, because of the injuries and stuff. So I think the rotation is going to be a little bit tighter. And I think you might see, like, I just wonder kind of how the season goes, Dawn's patience-wise, how many mistakes from, like, the freshmen and the transfers she will tolerate before she just cuts them out of the rotation.
Mitch, you say Texas is boring. Texas has 3 of their top 5 scorers back. That includes Madison Booker and Rory Harmon. The Longhorns are 35-3 when those 2 players are on the floor together. Yes, they lose Taylor Jones. Kyla Oldacre is back. They're going to have size in the front court that probably only South Carolina, quite frankly, can compete with. Why are we not talking about them? Just because the style of play that Vic Schaefer's running is just from 2016 and we're over it? Or...
Since you said Corey Close is the James Franklin of women's college basketball, is Vic Schaefer the Kirk Ferentz?
Oh, I was going to say Brian Kelly, but okay. All right.
No, I mean that in, like, you've won and you've been successful, but man, I really don't like watching your team play offense.
He's going to win 8 games a year every year. Well, so in this case, he's going to win 20 plus games a year, and they're going to be in the semifinals of the SEC tournament, and they're going to make the Sweet 16. So
yeah, no, I mean, look, I think Madison Booker is very, very good. She's the bus driver of this team. She's awesome. She's an All-American, all the stuff. For whatever reason, like, she hasn't really quite gotten the profile that some of her maybe contemporaries in her class have, like your Hannah Hidalgos and, all that stuff, kind of the stars of the sport. But she's been very, very good. Rory Harmon, I think, like, she was coming off an injury, but I think, like, we missed kind of some of that flash that we saw from her pre-injury last year. And then I have a question just kind of about their depth and stuff. Like, they do bring back 3 starters. Are you ready to depend on Kyla Oldacre for 30 minutes a game?
Yep. Well, can Kyla Oldacre stay out of foul trouble for 30 minutes a game?
Right. So, those are some of the questions I have. And then just kind of like depth-wise and some of those other starting spots, how are we filling those things in without some of the pieces that they lost from last year? They did get Taya Sidbury from Boston College, really good three-point shooter. Texas is going to be good this year. I kind of think they got a little bit of bracket luck last year and kind of caught lightning in a bottle and caught TCU on the right night, and they were able to kind of make Sidonia Prince, ineffective. And we'll see if they can do that again and get back to the Final Four.
Let's round out the SEC and the Power Four with Oklahoma. Again, Aaliyah Chavez, the number 1 recruit in the country, has proclaimed that Oklahoma making the Elite Eight. Not the Final Four, not the Natty, the Elite Eight, baby. And we're here for it because they do return 4 of their top 5 scorers. And certainly by adding the number 1 recruit in the nation, Jenny Baranchik's squad will be feisty. And if we're to base these preseason predictions off of returning talent, they have a lot of it, including Reagan Beers, who figures to be a first or second all-SEC performer.
Yeah, Oklahoma, I think is going to be pretty good this year. I think they're going to be a top 10 team for most of the season. I think that this is kind of the year where they have the best chance to break through. Like you mentioned, you got Reagan Beers as a senior, one of the best, post players in the country. And now you have Aaliyah Chavez. So this is your year with the 2 of them together. Can they make the Elite Eight? Can they make the Final Four? Can they make the SEC title game? I think, like, you expect to see some kind of milestones this year from that group under Jenny Baranchik. I'm actually going to go see them play. They play at Western Carolina later this year, which is kind of weird, but it's probably my only chance to see Aaliyah Chavez in person, so I'm going to go.
Love that. Love that. Let's hit the best of the rest. I'm going to couple these first 2 together. We were going to do a Big East preview just for you, Big East fans. And someone on this podcast may or may not have said, well, the Big East is UConn and everyone else. So
I said that.
Yes. So Mitch, tell us, UConn, the rest of the Big East, our expectations for America's sweetheart, AZ Fudd, Sarah Strong in year 2, and some of the other additions that Gino Auriemma has made to Stores, Connecticut.
Yeah, UConn's going to be a fun. I think if UConn doesn't make the Final Four, it's a massive disappointment. I think this roster is still incredibly talented. They are the preseason number 1. I believe they are also, that is in the AP poll, I believe they are also the preseason betting favorite. I think my questions for UConn this year is, okay, like, AZ Flood, super talented, really, really good 3-point shooter,
Great
really,
podcast
really good
host.
scorer.
Come on this podcast whenever you want, AZ. Just throw that
Sure.
out there. Manifest.
I don't think can be the bus driver in the way that Paige Beckers was. A player who I think is capable of that. I just wonder if they're going to put her in this role this year is Sarah Strong. Like, can Gino make her point center, point forward?
She's an undersized forward at that.
She's a really, really good passer. She's really, really smart. She does everything really, really well. She's going to get a lot of buzz as like a player of the year candidate this year. She's a preseason All-American, everything else. They made some nice additions, in the portal. I think, they also bring back KK Arnold. They also get a couple other players healthy. Sarah Williams is from transfer from Wisconsin, who was an all Big Ten player. Kaylee Heckel was a reserve guard last year at USC. They have Ashlyn Shade. They have Ice Brady. Caroline Ducharme is back. I wrote a story at SB Nation a couple months ago about kind of her journey and her battle with concussions. She seems to be back and fully healthy now at this time. So, I mean, the roster is super talented. Paige was kind of an eraser last year in terms of somebody who just made up for a lot of your mistakes and really, drove the bus offensively and defensively. Who is ready to step into that role this year? I think UConn is best off if the answer to that question is Sarah Strong.
Anyone else in the Big East a threat? Can you give us who's going to finish in second? Creighton?
I think
it has to be Creighton, right?
No, I think it's Marquette. I think Marquette won 21 games last year. They are, I believe, the only team in the country that brings back every player from last year's roster.
Wow.
So now the question was obviously, it's like, okay, well, were those players any good? And, they won 21 games, so they can just be a little bit better this year. I believe they were left on the bubble. I think they can be a tournament team. I think Creighton is typically always a threat in this league to be, in terms of a threat, second to UConn. I think Creighton should be a little bit better this year. I think Seton Hall will be better. The question is like, are they going to be good enough to make this more than a 2-bid league? I think right now, if you had to ask me, UConn gets in, they'll win the league, and Marquette will get an at-large bid somewhere in the ballpark of like an 8 or a 9 seed.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk mid-majors briefly. Then we're going to go to our lightning round. Mitch and I are going to give our preseason awards. It's going to be rapid fire, back and forth, quick little one-sentence statements.
Boom.
What we believe of some of those big superlatives heading into the 2025-2026 season. But first, Mitch, mid-majors, what conferences do you believe could be multi-bid leagues? Certainly the Ivy League with 3 bids to the NCAA tournament from a season ago, I would expect to be back in that conversation. And what say you as to some mid-major players we should have our eye
on? For the Ivy, I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back this year. I don't think Harvard is going to be as good. I have some questions about Columbia. I think Princeton is your favorite in that league. I think if there's a league where like I was counting on them to be a multi-bid league, I would pick the A10. I think the A10 could get 2 or 3 bids. I really, I expect Richmond to win that league. They're preseason AP top 25. I think George Mason is going to be really good again. They made the NCAA tournament last year. And I think Davidson is going to be really awesome this year and take some step forward and be in contention in that league as well. Mid-major player to pay attention to, there's a couple out there. I really like Maggie Dugan at Richmond. I'm going to give some love to the midshipmen in Annapolis. They are your preseason favorites in the Patriot League this year. Yeah, preseason number 1 in the Patriot. Zanai Barnett-Gay is a junior guard for the mids. Last season, she put up 19.2 points per game, 7.8 rebounds, 3.2 assists, shot 40% from the floor, 2.4 steals. Does a little bit of everything for them. Definitely is Navy's bus driver. If Navy is going to break through and win the Patriot this year and make the NCAA tournament, Zanai Barnett-Gay is going to be a big reason why.
I will just briefly, since I did host the ASUN Media Day last week, give a shout out to our friends at Florida Gulf Coast, new head coach in Reyna, who previously, of course, was over at Iowa, longtime assistant, Raina Harmon, now comes down to Florida Gulf Coast. Interesting gelling of the reigning threes idea now with Raina, laugh, as the head coach. I think that that's going to be, once again, a one bid league coming out of the ASUN with Florida Gulf Coast leading the way. And let's hit our superlatives, because I think a couple of our other friends of the pod are going to pop up here, Mitch. So I'm going to say the topic, and then you're going to give me your pick for it. You're going to give me a 1 or 2 sentence quick primer as to why this person is, or this team is, this winner. Biggest fall, the team that was good last year but won't be good this year. Mitch, you have
Georgia Tech. I really like Karen Blair. I think eventually she's going to do a really good job there. This roster was just decimated from, the team that we talked about on this podcast so much last season. Nell Fortner retires, and pretty much all of the really good players on that team transferred elsewhere. So Karen Blair kind of had to build this thing on the fly, and I just don't think they're going to be NCAA tournament good this year.
Low-hanging fruit for me for the biggest fall, Notre Dame. I don't care that they're in the top 25. I don't care that Niele Ivey and her amazing suits are still the head coach. I don't care that Hannah Hidalgo is the preseason ACC Player of the Year. They are bringing back just 2 players. It's literally Hannah Hidalgo and her BFF. I guess it's 3 technically, but it's Cassandra and it's Hannah. It's her and her best friend, and everyone else is transferring in. I just don't see this working out at all. And I wish the best for Hannah and Niele, because they're both really fun to watch, both as a coach and as a head coach. But it's not good times up in South Bend, in my estimation. Sorry, Notre Dame fans. I know there's actually a lot of you that listen to this pod. Biggest riser, the team that maybe last year, I don't want to say sucked, but they did not make the NCAA tournament. Who didn't make the NCAA tournament last year, Mitch, but they will this year, and why?
Miami. I think Miami brought in a really, really good transfer portal class led by Gal Raviv, who was awesome last year at Quinnipiac. I think averaged 17.8 points per game. Also, this summer with Israel in a FIBA tournament, broke that tournament. I believe it was the U19 World Cup. Broke that tournament scoring record by averaging 26 points per game. So she kind of leads that class. They get Rashea Kyle from Florida, a couple other pieces. Miami's going to be good this year and back in the mix for a tournament spot. And I agree with your choice as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that for biggest fall. I think you'll agree with my choice for biggest riser, unless that's what you were referring to.
Yes, we're both. Okay. Yeah, yes.
We're giving all the awards to our friends. Sean Poppy, Clemson, 14-17 from a season ago. I honestly think, Mitch, without even going into the roster, I'll let you kind of hit 1 or 2. I think it's by virtue of the ACC is down. Outside of the triangle, I think the ACC is down. That's going to open up the door for Sean Poppy and company down in little old Clemson.
Yeah, they have a really good roster this year. Another team that did really good in the transfer portal. Rachel Rose comes in from Wofford. She's on the Lieberman watch list. Rusnea Auguste from Georgia Tech, one of those Georgia Tech transfers I talked about, and Demara Hines, who comes over from Wake Forest. Clemson is also killing it on the recruiting trail and is going to have a very, very good roster in 2026 as well.
Who is on the hot seat? I'll go first, Mitch. And it pains me to say this because I have a lot of friends who work over in College Station and work with Joni Taylor. But ultimately, it's 11 total SEC wins in 3 seasons, 38 and 52 in College Station. An incredible leader, someone who had success at Georgia. I know that there's a lot of folks rooting for her. I'm rooting for her too, but we know what a pressure cooker, regardless of sport, that College Station and Texas A&M are.
Yeah, I would agree with Joni Taylor being on the hot seat. That is a job that I would tell you that a lot of agents have their eye on if it opens, and it's going to be a very interesting coaching search, as is everything that happens with coaching in Texas A&M. We also know that from Jimbo Fisher that Texas A&M is not afraid to pay people to go away. So I don't know what Joni Taylor's buyout situation is, but just keep that in mind. My hot seat pick is Carolyn Keeger at Penn State. She is entering her 7th season with the Nittany Lions and has yet to make the NCAA tournament. She is coming off a awful season where Penn State won just one Big Ten game, which is the second time that's happened in her tenure. And I think you couple the poor product on the court with the story that was published by Onward State last season, where several former players said that their mental health suffered while playing for her, which is not a good look, and Penn State stood by her. But I think now you're entering a season where things, if they don't go well, I don't expect her to be back in 2026. She has the product now, Kyman McMiller, and somehow got Gracie Merkle to come back. We talked about that. That's what I was going to say.
That's the one I don't get.
Having said that, they lost an exhibition game to Temple last week. So if they're going to do that, it's not going to be good.
Did Dawn pop up from South Carolina to coach Temple? I don't know. Maybe she's done running the daycare down in South Carolina. She popped up for that game and that game only. Next one, coach that will move up into the Power Four. I have Carla, the Princeton head coach. Berube, yes, UConn grad. Everyone thinks she's waiting around for Gino to retire. Is this the year, Mitch?
No, I don't think so. I have Vanessa Blair-Lewis at George Mason, who sniffed around and was a candidate at some Power Four openings last year, and I think will move up at the end of the season if Mason has another really good campaign.
Potential Cinderella we love. I wrote in, does USF without José count on the rundown despite being the preseason favorite to win the American? They have the preseason player of the year. Mitch wrote in, yes. I am going with USF. I also will give some shout out, some love to the former JU and ASUN leading scorer of the season in Eden Battle, who comes over and was an all-conference preseason selection in addition to 2 other first-team selections for the Bulls.
Yeah, my pick is Davidson. I spent some time down with the Wildcats last week. I'll have a story at some point over at SB Nation. But I think this is a really good roster. They kind of had a historic season by some measures last year. I think their most wins ever in A10 play. I think they're going to continue to keep building on that and take a step forward. A lot of international flair on that roster as well, but I think they're going to be pretty good.
National Player of the Year. I don't want to say it's going to be these 2 players, but I have Sarah Strong. Mitch, you have Lauren Betts. I think it goes without saying that as of this writing, those are the 2 players most people have their eye on. I'll be curious to see if anyone else emerges. Final 4 predictions. We did our way too early Final 4 prior to transfer portal season back in April. I'm curious to hear, Mitch, how has your Final 4 shifted now just less than a week out from the start of the regular season?
Right now I have UConn, LSU, UCLA, and Duke. And I mean, I think that could change very easily. You could definitely convince me that South Carolina is not only going to go to the Final Four but win the national championship. I also like one of your picks as well that you will get to. But yeah, I think if you roll the dice, like that could be a Final Four that we end up with.
I have UConn and LSU as well, again, based off the coaches, based off of the sheer talent on both rosters. I have Maryland. I picked them in April. I will stick by them because I do think that if anyone has proven she can take transfers, she can take circle pegs, square pegs, and mesh them all together into the perfect little combination of little puzzle pieces, it is Brenda Frese. Brenda Frese back to the Final Four for the first time in nearly a decade. And little old South Carolina, somehow, some way, no Chloe Kitts. Tanaya Latson, is it another Dawn's daycare situation? No problem. Dawn Staley back in the Final Four. Don't know if they make the national title game, but I do believe the Gamecocks will be back in the Final Four when all is said and done.
See you in Phoenix.
Lightning round edition of the preview of the 2025, 2020. I keep saying 2026. I don't know. I'm going to get it right at some point in time.
It's Halloween, 2020 Twix.
2020 Twix. 2020 Twix season. We'll be having lots of Twix in Phoenix for the Final Four. That does it for our conference preview, season preview of the 2025-2020 Twix college basketball season. Next week, we will dive into those early week 1 storylines. We will have a game at the U.S. Naval Academy that we will certainly be discussing as well. Until then, he's Mitch. I'm Mia saying we will catch you next week.
Deuces.